I stood there, swaying slightly, the edges of my vision starting to blur, a sickly sweet taste lingering on my tongue that definitely wasn't champagne. My own wedding, the biggest day of my life, the culmination of years of dreaming and months of frantic planning, and I was pretty sure my sister had just dosed my drink. My sister, the same person who, moments later, I would allow to stand in front of 300 of my closest friends and family, a microphone in her hand, to deliver a toast. Was I wrong for letting her do it? Was I wrong for the way I handled the entire, horrific situation that followed? Tell me honestly what you would have done if your own sister had tried to sabotage your wedding day in the most insidious way possible. Let me take you back to the beginning, to a time before I ever suspected the venom that flowed through my sister's veins, or at least, before it became so apparent. My name is Clara, and my sister, Bethany, is 3 years older than me. Growing up, our relationship was complicated. She was always the golden child, the effortlessly beautiful one, the one who excelled in everything without even trying. I, on the other hand, was the studious one, the quiet one, always feeling like I was living in her shadow, constantly striving for approval that rarely came. Our parents, bless their hearts, genuinely loved us both, but they had a way of inadvertently fueling the fire of Bethany's entitlement and my insecurity. Every achievement of mine was met with a, "That's nice, but look what Bethany did," or a subtle comparison that always left me feeling a little less. Despite all this, I loved her. She was my sister, my only sibling, and I always held out hope that one day we'd have that perfect sisterly bond you see in movies. I tried, I really did. I celebrated her successes, comforted her through her heartbreaks, and was always her fiercest defender. The truth is, I wanted to be like her in so many ways: her confidence, her charisma, her ability to charm anyone into anything. But that admiration often curdled into resentment, especially when her actions crossed the line from playful sibling rivalry to outright malice. The cracks really started to show in our adult lives. Bethany had a string of failed relationships and an inability to hold down a stable job, constantly relying on our parents for financial support. I, meanwhile, had slowly but surely built a career I was proud of, found a wonderful partner in Liam, and was finally starting to feel comfortable in my own skin, stepping out of that lifelong shadow. Liam was everything I ever wanted. He was kind, supportive, hilarious, and genuinely saw me for who I was, flaws and all. We had been together for 5 years when he proposed, a magical evening under a blanket of stars, and I was absolutely over the moon. The planning began immediately, and I poured my heart and soul into every detail. We decided on a relatively lavish wedding, knowing it was a once-in-a-lifetime event. We budgeted carefully, saved diligently, and with a little help from my incredibly generous parents, who, by the way, were footing a significant portion of Bethany's living expenses at the time, we were looking at an $80,000 celebration. It was going to be perfect. Every floral arrangement, every menu choice, every song on the playlist was meticulously chosen to reflect our love story. This is where Bethany's true colors began to bleed through. From the moment I announced my engagement, there was a shift in her. The congratulations felt hollow, laced with a subtle bitterness. She started making snide remarks about the cost of the wedding, about how I was wasting money, despite her own constant expenditures on designer clothes and extravagant vacations, all paid for by our parents. She even made a few pointed comments about Liam, questioning his intentions, suggesting he was only with me for my stability. I tried to brush it off, to be understanding. Maybe she was jealous, I reasoned. Maybe she was just going through a tough time. I tried to include her in the wedding planning, asking her to be a bridesmaid, letting her pick her dress, even assigning her the task of helping me choose the wedding favors. But every interaction became a battle. She'd complain about the color scheme, critique my choices, and constantly compare my wedding to some imaginary, far superior event she would have. It was exhausting. The week of the wedding was a whirlwind of last-minute details and mounting excitement. Bethany was increasingly moody, barely speaking to me, and giving off an air of barely contained resentment. My mom, always the peacemaker, tried to mediate, but it was clear Bethany was beyond reasoning. I was so caught up in the final preparations, the joyous anticipation of marrying the man I loved, that I barely registered the depth of her anger. I was just focused on getting through the day without any major hiccups, hoping that once the wedding was over, Bethany would snap out of it and we could go back to some semblance of normalcy. Oh, how naive I was! The morning of the wedding was beautiful. The sun was shining, the air was crisp, and I felt a nervous flutter of excitement in my stomach. Getting ready with my bridesmaids, including Bethany, was a mix of laughter and champagne. Everything seemed perfect. The ceremony itself was a dream. Liam looked so handsome, and as I walked down the aisle, I felt a wave of pure, unadulterated happiness wash over me. We exchanged our vows, said "I do," and sealed it with a kiss that felt like the start of our forever. The reception followed, held in a gorgeous ballroom adorned with flowers and twinkling lights. The atmosphere was electric, filled with joy, music, and the clinking of glasses. This is where things started to go sideways. After the initial pictures and greetings, Liam and I made our way to our sweetheart table. Our drinks were brought to us, champagne for me, and something non-alcoholic for Liam, as he wasn't a big drinker. I took a sip, and immediately something felt off. It was too sweet, almost syrupy, with a strange, metallic aftertaste. I frowned, looking at the glass. It wasn't flat, but it definitely didn't taste like the crisp, dry champagne I had tasted during the menu sampling. I glanced at Liam, who was laughing with one of his groomsmen. I took another small sip, trying to place the flavor, and then I noticed Bethany. She was across the room at the bridesmaids' table, but her eyes were locked on me, a strange, almost triumphant smirk playing on her lips. A cold dread seeped into my stomach. My mind raced. Why would she be looking at me like that? Why did my drink taste so strange? Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The room seemed to tilt, and the joyful chatter around me became muffled, distant. My head started to throb, and a sudden nausea made my stomach clench. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself. Liam, noticing my sudden pallor, turned to me, his smile fading. "Clara, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I tried to speak, but my tongue felt thick and heavy. A terrible thought, an insidious whisper, started to form in my mind. What if Bethany had done something? It seemed impossible, unthinkable, but her smirk, the strange taste, the sudden onset of symptoms. It all clicked into place with a horrifying certainty. I remembered a conversation a few weeks ago, a joke she made about spiking the punch at some party. It wasn't a joke to her. I excused myself, mumbling something about needing fresh air, and stumbled towards the ladies' room, Liam immediately following me, concerned. In the privacy of the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face, trying to clear my head, but the dizziness intensified. My vision was swimming. Liam asked me again what was wrong, his voice filled with worry. I looked at him, my husband, on our wedding day, and the truth, raw and ugly, spilled out. "Liam," I whispered, my voice trembling, "I think Bethany." I think she put something in my drink." His eyes widened in shock, then narrowed with a fierce protectiveness. He immediately went to find our wedding planner and my parents. Meanwhile, I was getting worse. I felt disoriented, disassociated. This wasn't how my wedding day was supposed to be. This wasn't how I was supposed to feel. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. What would your immediate reaction be if you suspected your own sister had dosed you on your wedding day? Would you confront her immediately, loudly, creating a scene? Would you try to get help discreetly? What would you do about the rest of the wedding? My parents and the wedding planner arrived, their faces etched with horror and disbelief as Liam explained what I suspected. My mom, usually so composed, looked absolutely devastated. My dad's jaw was clenched, a vein throbbing in his temple. The wedding planner, a true professional, immediately took charge. She had a small, discreet medical kit for emergencies and an experienced staff. She instructed one of her assistants to get me some activated charcoal and a lot of water, while another called a discreet, private medical service to come to the venue, just in case. She also made sure my remaining drink was carefully collected as evidence. My mom, tears welling in her eyes, held my hand, murmuring apologies and expressions of love. "We'll handle Bethany," she promised, her voice laced with an uncharacteristic steel, but I stopped them. Even in my disoriented state, a plan, cold and precise, began to form in my mind. A public confrontation would ruin the entire day, not just for me, but for all our guests who had come to celebrate with us. It would turn our joyous occasion into a spectacle of familial drama. No, I wasn't going to let her win that way. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing my wedding day descend into chaos because of her spite. I looked at my parents, then at Liam, who was watching me with a mixture of concern and unwavering support. "No," I said, my voice still a little slurred but firm, "we're not making a scene, not yet, but she's still going to give her toast." My mom looked at me, bewildered. "Clara, you can't be serious, after what she's done." My dad started to protest, but I shook my head. "Trust me, this is how we handle it." Liam, understanding the steely glint in my eyes, squeezed my hand. "Whatever you want, my love, I'm with you." With the help of the activated charcoal and water, and the knowledge that medical help was on the way, I slowly started to feel a tiny bit more grounded, though the fogginess persisted. I was determined to push through, to make it look like nothing was wrong. I put on my bravest smile, reapplied my lipstick, and walked back into the reception ballroom, leaning subtly on Liam. The music was still playing, people were still laughing and dancing. No one seemed to have noticed my absence for those crucial minutes. As soon as we were back at our table, the DJ announced that it was time for the toasts. My maid of honor went first, delivering a beautiful, heartfelt speech that brought tears to my eyes. Then it was Bethany's turn. She walked up to the microphone, looking smug, completely unaware that her little plan had been uncovered. She held her glass high, a predatory glint in her eyes as she looked directly at me. I met her gaze, a forced smile on my face, but inside, a storm was brewing. She started her toast, and it was exactly what I expected: a thinly veiled collection of backhanded compliments and passive-aggressive digs. She reminisced about our childhood, twisting anecdotes to make me seem less intelligent, less desirable, always emphasizing her own superiority. She even managed to weave in a subtle jab about Liam's luck in landing me, implying it was more about my parents' wealth than my own worth. Her voice was dripping with false sweetness, but her eyes, when they met mine, were full of venom. She ended with a dismissive to Clara and Liam, "I guess," and took a large swig from her glass. The entire time my parents were fuming, Liam's arm was protectively around my waist, and I, despite the lingering dizziness, maintained my composure, my smile fixed. After her toast, I knew what I had to do. As she returned to her table, I subtly caught the eye of one of the waitstaff, who discreetly placed a new identical glass of champagne in front of Bethany. The original, untouched glass that had been intended for me. The glass that, thanks to my sister's malicious hand, had been dosed. My parents, watching my every move, caught on immediately. Their eyes widened in understanding, a mixture of shock and dawning horror. Bethany, oblivious, took another sip of her own champagne, then reached for the fresh glass, thinking it was just a replacement or a top-up. She took a large, triumphant gulp. The effect wasn't immediate, but it was swift. Within minutes, as the next speaker delivered their toast, Bethany started to sway. Her eyes, which had been so sharp with malice, began to unfocus. She clutched the table, her face paling. The smug smirk was replaced by a look of confusion, then alarm. I watched, outwardly serene, as my sister, who had tried to ruin my wedding, slowly began to experience the very symptoms she had intended for me. The private medical team, alerted by the wedding planner, was already at the venue, discreetly waiting in a back room. As the symptoms intensified, Bethany started to mumble incoherent words spilling from her lips. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled, and she nearly fell. My parents, despite their anger, were still her parents. My mom rushed to her side, her face a mask of concern, while my dad, grim-faced, signaled to the medical team. They moved quickly and professionally, discreetly escorting a visibly disoriented and nauseous Bethany out of the ballroom, away from the watchful eyes of the guests, who mostly assumed she'd simply had too much to drink. No one suspected the true, dark nature of what had just transpired. The rest of the evening was, miraculously, salvaged. The wedding continued, joyous and celebratory, as if nothing had happened. Liam was a rock, making sure I was okay, constantly checking in, his love shining through every worried glance. My parents, though shaken, maintained their composure, circulating among guests, ensuring everyone was having a good time. Later that night, after the reception had ended and Liam and I were finally alone in our bridal suite, my parents called. Bethany was fine, physically. The dose wasn't lethal, just disorienting and nauseating. They had taken her to the hospital, where a full toxicology report was ordered, confirming the presence of a strong sedative in her system, the same sedative that was found in my initial drink sample. She had admitted everything, a tearful, rambling confession driven by jealousy and resentment. She couldn't stand to see me happy, successful, and loved, especially when her own life felt so out of control. The consequences for Bethany were severe. Our parents, heartbroken and furious, finally cut her off financially. They insisted she seek professional help, not just for her jealousy, but for what they realized was a deeper, more troubling psychological issue. The relationship between us, already fractured, was shattered beyond repair. I haven't spoken to her since, and honestly, I don't know if I ever will. It's a wound that runs deep, knowing that my own sister could be capable of such calculated cruelty. Looking back, I don't regret my decision. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of ruining my day with a public scene. Instead, I let her taste her own medicine, quite literally. It was a cold, calculated move, I know, but it allowed my wedding day to remain a celebration of love, not a spectacle of family drama. It also allowed her to experience, firsthand, the very distress she intended for me, without me having to lift a finger or utter a single accusation. It was a silent, powerful form of poetic justice. Our wedding photos are filled with smiles, laughter, and love, with no hint of the dark shadow Bethany cast. My marriage to Liam is stronger than ever, built on a foundation of trust and unwavering support. He saw me at my most vulnerable, and he stood by me. That, in itself, is the greatest blessing. So, that's my story. It was the most beautiful and, simultaneously, the most horrifying day of my life. I still grapple with the emotions of it all, the betrayal, the anger, and the profound sadness of losing a sister to her own demons. Like this video if you were on my side, if you think I handled it the right way. Subscribe for more stories like this, and please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.